with the center nucleus and electrons going around. For many reasons, this picture, this popular image of the atom is not quite right. So one of Bohr's models triumphs were in fact that he identified that certain orbits were allowed and certain were not, but even that is not quite right. We'll just go on to, well, I'll skip this one. Okay, here's the model of the atom that we all understand, we have all seen from textbooks. One is, of course, there's the proton in the center and the electron on the outside, and there are neutrons as on the figure on the left hand side, here on the right hand side, you can see some neutrons in the nucleus and some protons and some electrons orbiting. This particular picture is not quite the truth, I'm not sure whether I will call it a lie, but it is certainly misleading in the sense that it does not give you an impression that the electron is much smaller than the atom itself and much smaller than the nucleus. It is not to scale. And this does not lead to a really understanding what the atom looks like. Okay, here's more you can see here. This is more what an atom looks like. It's not good for illustration, certainly not good for school textbooks. But you see the little dot in the center is the nucleus, which is about 100,000 times smaller than the atom. And again, the electrons themselves are 1,000 times smaller than that of the nucleus. Okay, but even worse than that, the electrons themselves, the orbits are not usually identifiable. They're basically electron clouds. So basically you have the clouds around it and a tiny dot in the center. It's almost like if you think of it's a planet orbiting or the moon orbiting a planet, the nucleus would be there and the nearest electron would be at the distance of the moon. So the distances in the atom, not only that, and the atom is not only mostly empty, what we consider the size of the atom, the size of the proton, and the size of the electron are not conveyed by a diagram like this because of the scaling involved. And the arrow at the bottom shows that the atom is about a billionth of an inch. So it's tiny. The atom itself is very small, the nucleus is even smaller, and the electrons are even smaller than that. But the key question, which probably nobody asked, you did not ask your science teacher in school, is if you hold an atom in hand, will it feel solid, or because it's all empty, will it squish in your hands? So what is meant by the size of the atom? Since the electron is just a cloud and you don't know exactly where it is, it's orbiting. So what is meant by the size of an atom? And that is a question that really does not have a correct answer, because it turns out that the size of any small object like that depends on what you are measuring it with. If you're looking at it, you're essentially using light rays to measure it, and therefore it is a different object than if you are probing it with something else. So in what we'll talk about with the Higgs boson, the size of the object, particularly the size of the electron, does play a key role. The properties of the electron does play a key role. And please bear with me if I'm giving you too much detail, because okay, here's the hydrogen atom, the simplest atom. It's also quite elegant. There's just one electron involved, one proton in the center, the clouds, and looks very, well, elegant, beautiful maybe, and you can make a picture out of it. So it's not to scale, but still it is what is called the smallest bound state. That means we have two particles that are bound to each other. They are attracted to each other by the fact that the electron has a negative charge and the proton has a positive charge. Gravity does not play much role in it, so it's the fact that gravity has no role to play in this model. And in fact, one scientist, Strassler, described this as, think of a married couple in which one partner is very heavy, that's the proton, and does not move around very much. The other partner, which much lighter, is always flirting around, moving about at about 1% of the speed of light, going round and round around the center. So it's a bound state, it's an elegant picture of an atom that and it's slightly better picture than what you remember from your school or college days. Okay, then next is, we talked a little bit about electrons. Electron, the size of the electron is important. The electron does have a mass, but the size is very uncertain. And all we can say is it's very small, and we call it almost a point particle. That means we cannot determine size accurately. It's very, very small. But the proton is bigger. But now we come to really a mess. The proton that most pictures point out is just a round object, as you saw in the early sketches of the atom. It's not round. It's not as simple nor as elegant as the hydrogen atom. The proton itself is a disaster because it consists of two types of quarks and gluons that are moving around inside the proton at about the speed of light. And they're described as zillions of them, very, very large number of them, uncountable number, moving around inside the proton at almost the speed of light. So now you see, we have a particle that is bizarre, that it consists of three types of even smaller particles that carry different charges, and it's just not three types, the numbers are huge, zillions of them, millions and millions of them floating around in this small object. So, and if you look up the book, they'll say the proton has three types of subparticles in them. There are things that are smaller than the proton. There are two up quarks and antiquarks. There are down quarks and down antiquarks and gluons. I don't want to explain all these subparticles in it. What somebody describes them is the zoo of subatomic particles. That means so many have been discovered that now you really need, it's like a zoo of subatomic particles. But all of them now, when you look at the totality of them, they need explanation. Why do they exist? But more than anything, the Higgs boson is the long sought answer is to why and how these particles have different masses. Remember I said electron has no dimension, that means almost a point, and yet it has mass. So how does the electron have mass? And there are other subparticles that also have mass and charge, and again all that need explanation, and the Higgs boson allows an explanation of the mass of these small particles. So it's nothing more or nothing less than that, and any explanation I give you from now or from this to that is just trying to explain how we arrived at the conclusion and what the scientists are up to and what the huge machinery that is designed to detect the Higgs bosons are doing. So I'll try my best. Please bear with me. It's not an easy subject to explain, and it's probably very, very dry. I can't put any jokes in it, no interesting pictures. That's all I can do. Okay. So here's the nucleus. We already 99% of the mass of the atom is in the nucleus, but that 1% with the electron is what makes the difference. And the atoms themselves are very small, and we've been through that. And let's see. Okay, and here we have same picture. And this zoo of subatomic particles are so many now that they need properties, they need quantum numbers, and one of the things that they're called hadrons. And if they participate in strong interactions, again, don't bother the technical terms, just that we try to classify into two types. Hadrons, if they do participate in the strong interactions, and if they don't participate, they're called leptons. And similarly, the other thing, if they have electric charge, we say they charge plus. If they have no, it's either positive or negative electric charge. If they have a mass, again, we distinguish with mass. So none of the particles that we talked about, and there's very many of them, have identical properties. That means they may be identical in some properties, not in all the properties. And spin. And spin is the important part because this is what distinguishes a boson from a fermion. So spin can be either integers, that means 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, or in half integers, half, 1 and a half, and so on. So here they are. So particles in the integer spins are called bosons, and the particles with half integer spin are called fermions. Bosons are named after Satyendranath Bose, and fermions named after Fermi. Enrico Fermi, again, was a nuclear physicist. Okay, so bosons like the company of other particles of that kind. That means you can have bosons grouping together, whereas fermions avoid each other. And protons and neutrons are large, and electrons are again point, like we've been through this. And these are the 3 or 4 types: electrons, protons, neutrons, and possibly the neutrino, were detected and studied in the laboratory. But once you realize that what are protons, we discovered that a very large number of them, of very fast-moving protons, are entering the Earth from the outside. These are the cosmic rays. The cosmic rays are basically very energetic protons that are coming and hitting the atmosphere. And we should be thankful to the atmosphere protecting us from these energetic cosmic rays. Anyway, so they are being generated. You can see them, and as they hit the atmosphere, because of the high energy, they create a shower of other particles. And as they hit the atoms and molecules in the atmosphere, the debris from there, the broken pieces from other atoms are the ones that are giving us new types of subatomic particles, and they have been detected in the study of cosmic rays. So again, as I said before, many of the troubles in physics, and in fact the subject of study, are coming from outside the main branches of physics, from upper atmosphere physics, from astrophysics. There's the muons and anti-muons, the pions, the pions, and there are hadrons there, and these particles are the neutrinos. Anyway, there are a whole bunch of them. Neutrinos are, again, they don't have any electric charge, they barely have a mass, they don't feel any force, and they pass through us as we sit here. Neutrinos are passing through us and through the Earth, and none of us feel it because they're tiny and carry so much energy. So again, we come to this problem. How come some of the particles have mass and others do not? That is the main question that the Higgs boson study is seeking to answer. So photons do not, but okay. So much like I go back. One more. Okay. Now, many of you have seen the periodic table of elements. There are about 110 elements now known, maybe slightly higher, 150. And you have to, because of the properties, you can classify them. Now there are so many subatomic particles that we need to make up something like the periodic table to classify them. And here's one of them, which is which is called a standard model of particles. And physicists have actually essentially run out of words to describe the properties of the particles. So mass is one of them we talked about. Charge is one of them. It's whether they're electric. What the electric spin is, of course, we can understand spin. And then there are other properties, namely charge and up or down or top, strain, and there are other names, tau. Essentially, the gluons and Z boson, W boson, photon is essentially the running out of how to describe the properties and to name them, and so we have this. And so the standard model has been extremely successful in classifying them, describing certain properties, and predicting that where there's a gap in the particles, certain particles would be detected. And what was missing is that our idea of whether we can get some explanation for the very, very differing mass of these subatomic particles. And exposed to the protons, antiprotons. So the Higgs boson is part of the standard model. It is very, very special. And what Higgs said about, I think 30 years back, or even earlier, 30 years back, what he said was, we don't know what is providing a mass for these small particles, and particularly he was looking at the electron, and there are other subatomic particles for which there is no real explanation of the mass, and there are problems in setting of the equations that describe the behavior of these particles. So Higgs said that imagine that throughout the universe, everywhere, that this sort of field or sort of fluid that you can think like it's made of something like asphalt or something. And as the electron tries to move through it, the resistance it feels is what it's contributing to the mass. So if it's a larger subatomic particle, it's feeling a greater resistance. There are other properties, etc. But in the very crudest of terms, it's like you are trying to swim in a very thick fluid, like a muddy river or something like that. And the smaller you are, the more less resistance you feel. The larger you are, more resistance. That gives you the idea of what the Higgs field is. It's the Higgs field that is providing the mass to these subatomic particles. And so, if in fact there is something called a Higgs field, and there is something called a Higgs boson, how does one detect it? How can we be sure that in fact Higgs theory is right, that he has in fact predicted something? And that itself requires, is a very, very, so, okay. Yeah, here at the bottom cartoon you will see it's similar to the celebrity effect in a crowd. That means somebody very famous, like a film star is in a crowd, there are a lot of people around, and that particular film star has a very hard time moving. So that's where the Higgs effect comes in. Whereas somebody not so famous is standing in the periphery, has little problem. So basically that's the idea of a Higgs field, that it is associated with certain particles. Okay, we can go on to the next one. There's Higgs. So the mass of the atom comes mostly from its tiny nucleus, and the electrons from a broad cloud around the nucleus itself. Contribution less than a tiny fraction to the mass. Okay, so the mass itself of the electron does not really contribute to the mass of the atom. So why does it have a mass? It doesn't need to have a mass. But it turns out that the tiny mass of the electron is needed to give it size. Remember we discussed a little bit of the size of the atom. So if the electron was lighter, then the size of the atom would be much bigger. If the electron was heavier, that means it had more mass, then the size of the atom will be smaller. Okay. If the electron did not have the mass it has, then the atom itself becomes so large, the force between the center and the electron would become very little, and therefore the atom itself would collapse, would break apart. So that in fact, if the electron had much less mass than what it is now, none of us would be here. That means because the atoms would not be existing. And again, if the electron was too denser or had more mass, it would be too close to the atom to form the chemical elements that we all know about, and in fact from which we are made. And therefore, this particular thing is important to the existence of the universe as we know it. No, back one. Yeah. Okay, here's the Higgs field, and it shows it's like a thick fluid, and the particle is trying to move in there. It's a sticky. The English call it treacle. It's a sticky, syrupy type of thing, and it's an interaction with this treacle that gives mass to the particles. And so the Higgs boson is something that we're trying to detect, that you can visualize as a mass of the stuff. Okay. So when you want to measure the sound wave, for example, I'm speaking sound waves are generated, that's the sound field, and you have a microphone that is measuring the sound field, and you know, so that you can detect and map the field. But in the case of Higgs boson, it's not that easy to generate the field, and so it requires a huge machine called the Large Hadron Collider, in which they take two protons that are moving almost at the speed of light and they hit each other. When they hit each other, that's when a lot of debris comes out in all directions. And in that debris, there will be perhaps the Higgs boson. Okay, so now we more or less know how to generate a Higgs boson. We have these things and they hit each other, and in that debris comes out the Higgs boson. But what happens is that it's very hard to generate this boson. Something like in about 10 billion hits, maybe one boson appears, one Higgs boson appears. Okay, even after we generate, after 1,000 billion trials, they hit and then it comes out, then that particle that is generated has a very small lifetime. Before you can say Higgs boson, that particle itself disintegrates. So even if we succeed in producing the Higgs boson, it's gone before we know it. But when it disintegrates, it produces a certain characteristic debris, certain characteristic particles, so that the detectors that try to detect this are the ones that are trying to detect the debris from the decay of the Higgs boson, not the Higgs boson itself, because it just lifetime is too short. So here we have the problem. A very expensive machine, a huge machine, in fact, we'll see some pictures, are created simply to accelerate the protons to the speed of light. They go bang, and when they go bang, a lot of stuff comes out, and for 1,000 billion times, nothing of any value comes out, but in that one instance, something comes out, and that thing decays before you can blink an eye, and you're looking at the decay product, the Higgs boson. And that's what when they announced that we have detected, maybe, that why the qualification maybe, because they must have seen the decay product, the Higgs boson. Because unless they repeat the experiment, perhaps 1,000 times, unless detect at least 1,000 Higgs boson, you cannot be sure that you have actually done it. Because there are many other things that could give rise to errors. So that's why in all the news reports you saw, maybe they qualified it, because one never knows that it was a fluke or something. So that's why the qualification. Okay, so let's look at some of the pictures. So, this is a very difficult particle to generate. If it's generated, it doesn't live at all. It doesn't live very long. It decays very rapidly, and there is the decay products of this very short-lived particle that we are trying to detect, and that is what is that publisher called it God particles, and that has caused excitement worldwide, and people are getting excited and saying, is there a God particle is meeting with religion and physics? Nothing of the sort. It's just another physics experiment that may or may not work, may or may not be correct. And the detectors have huge, not only the whole Large Hadron. Here it is in Switzerland, and CERN, there's a Large Hadron Collider, is underground, and the paths that you see are used to, that circular paths there are used to accelerate. You can have an idea of how large the thing is. You can see the lake at the top on the right hand side there, and the river, and so this is fairly large. The ring is several kilometers in diameter, and there are magnets that speed the proton along, so that the two protons, so that they can collide. And here they are. You see the two paths that are colliding right at where the two cross, and where the two protons meet each other. You can see from the mountains in the background, the size again form an idea of the scale of this experiment and of the equipment. And these are, if you think of a big building in Bhubaneswar. These detectors are of that size. That means when you're looking at it, you are looking at a multi-story building there that is trying to detect the Higgs boson. So very expensive equipment, very expensive experiment, and yet at the end, that they felt that it was worthwhile simply to get an understanding of the theory behind the mass of the subatomic particles. Cathedral size, it probably gives you an idea of the size of the detectors. Precise, here with the accuracy of the fast, 40 billion pictures a second. These are the cameras that are used. And okay, more pictures. Here this is the Atlas detector. You can see there is a symmetry to it, and it's beautiful, etc. But again, you can see the person standing at the bottom to see how large this is as a piece of equipment. For this one purpose, to detect a particle that is so short-lived. This is the CMS detector, the ALICE detector, and LHC, Large Hadron Collider B detector. Okay, and this is just a cartoon I picked up from somewhere on the web. It's a photon 2, you can see going that way, and from the top you can see the dotted line coming. There's photon 1, they collide, and you see the debris that is flying in all directions. And if luck holds, maybe 1 in 1,000 billion times, they'll see a Higgs boson. So, let's go back one. Okay, here. There are other problems in physics that I'm not going to talk about, but simply to make you aware. Matter comes in two forms: regular matter of which you are formed, and antimatter, in which the proton, in our case, the proton has a positive charge, electron, and negative charge. You can have an equally good atom in which the proton is negatively charged, and the electron is positively charged. It's called a positron. That's studied regularly. It's not very strange particles. But the question is, when the universe formed, matter and antimatter should have been formed in equal amounts. We don't see that. So where has all the antimatter gone? So this is another problem that the Large Hadron Collider, that particular equipment, will try to find some answers to. We'll also try to explore that perhaps, and we'll see when I talk about dark matter, there are other problems associated, and possibly one explanation that the other forces of nature that physics hasn't yet discovered. And the LHC, or the Large Hadron Collider, is the one who will try to find out if in fact there are forces that have been ignored or undetected on Earth. And the tiny black holes also a possibility. And now I switch to dark matter and energy. Well, I'll show you why. It's very disturbing time in physics because there is vast ignorance and certainly very puzzling time for physicists. And for a while it looked like we understood the universe as it is. We know that the Big Bang, or we can trace back at some point about 14 billion years ago, sort of Big Bang occurred that has created the universe as we know now. And about 10 billion years ago, much of the universe was defined. Our own solar system is about 6 billion years ago old, as Earth is about 5.5 billion years. Life as we know it appeared most likely about 2 billion years ago. About 600 million years ago, again we switched from billion to million, life appeared profusely on Earth. The atmosphere became rich with oxygen, plants appeared, animals appeared, etc. And as we come forward in time, humans evolved about 2 million years ago. And civilization, again, now we switch from millions to thousands. Civilization as we know it, the beginning of agriculture is about 40,000 years ago. Most history, recorded history, would be about 10,000. So our presence on this planet and the universe is a tiny fraction. But we try to understand, and this is, we thought we knew it. But there are certain problems that are leading the physicists to speculate that in fact we do not know 90% of the universe. It's composed of dark matter. And with the dark matter also there's another problem called dark energy. These are two names. It just shows the ignorance of really a vast amount. Because if we don't know